Thank you, Pranit. Good morning from sunny Singapore. I hope everyone is well. Great discussion this morning. Yes, this is an exciting topic. It's broad. Does an hour do it justice? Probably not, but we have a wonderful panel for you. Reimagining human capital, the workplace and the workforce. And as I said, there's a lot to get through. It's a privilege to be moderating this session with such a fantastic panel. Thanks, Shen, for letting me do this. It's a super exciting hour. And what we've done with the panel has been a bit of work behind the scenes and breaking it down into very topical, I suppose, sectors, if you like, or parts of it, whether it's talent demand and supply, reskilling, upskilling, mental health, we know has been touched on. And we've got an excellent panel to discuss. And in terms of that panel, I'm going to go into the introductions now. So firstly, we have Renee McGowan. Good morning, Renee. Renee has been a true globetrotter for Mercer for 20 years. Renee had worked in the UK, New York, Australia, and is now based in Hong Kong, and has recently taken on a larger mandate, being promoted to president, looking after Asia, Middle East, and Africa. Good morning, Renee, and welcome.
Morning, Adam. Thank you for having me. Lovely to be here with everyone.
Fantastic. Next, we have Joel Frassenberg. He's a financial powerhouse, if you like, starting his career with Goldman Sachs, where he was for 8 years. He then moved into investment management before moving to Citibank, where he's been for the last 10 years, lived in Japan, more recently moved to Hong Kong, where he's based, and he's a managing director for human resources for Singapore and ASEAN. Good morning, Joel.
Good morning. Wonderful to be here. Thank you.
Fantastic. Next, we have Lisa Tay, currently the VP and Head of Human Resources for Enterprise for J&J across APAC. A very impressive background whereby Lisa has worked in senior HR positions from huge multinationals, from the likes of GE, Hewlett-Packard, VMware, before landing at J&J, where she's been for the past 7 years. Good morning, Lisa.
Good morning, Adam. Good morning, everyone. Thank you for having me, and I'm looking forward to the time ahead.
Great to have you here. And last, but no means least, we have Sanjeev Johar, currently Divisional Vice President at Abbott. Sanjeev started his career at Unilever before going on to Bayer and the likes of Roche Diagnostics, where he spent 11 years of his career before joining Aller in 2013, which was acquired by Abbott in 2016, has been there ever since. And what a great diagnostics we know is playing a huge part. So fantastic to have you here, Sanjeev, and good morning.
Yeah, good morning, Adam, and thanks for having me. Hi, everyone. Looking forward to a very stimulating discussion.
Yeah, well, thank you for that. And just before we get started, we know the pandemic has, I suppose, brought significant and possibly permanent changes to the workplace. And as I said earlier, this topic is rather broad, and we've broken it down, and we're going to start in an area, I suppose, which has been touched on this week when you're listening to the two panelists, but the reformed and redesigned workplace, that's where we're going to start, which is quite an interesting topic in itself. And we have to make sure that we run on time. And just incidentally, to the live audience that is out there, you can send your questions to the share your thought box, because I want to try and make sure we have 5 or 10 minutes at the end where we're taking questions and putting them to our panel. So bear that in mind. Send your questions to the share your thought box on your system. So that'll be good to do that at the end. So the reformed and redesigned workplace. Now, Joel, I'm going to start with you, Joel. I'll come to you first. Now, we all know the pandemic has certainly changed and continues to change the dynamic of the workplace. And I suppose at Citi, how have you adjusted in the last 12 months? Has it enabled performance to remain? Has it improved? It'd be interesting to get your thoughts on that first, if we may.
Sure. Thanks for starting with me, Adam. Good morning, everyone. Indeed, without question, COVID has materially changed the workplace and the overall business ecosystem in several ways. And we had to really adjust, as I'm sure everybody did, on the fly, seemingly overnight. Some broad trends, that we've seen that have been accelerated by COVID, by the pandemic. Remote work, clearly being the first, digitization, a second. Let me touch on, remote work and how we've managed that at Citi. The adoption of remote work, Zoom meetings, continue to be the norm, and will likely continue to be the norm even post-COVID to some extent. The levels of remote work, virtual meetings may not be as intense, as they were and have been during the height of the pandemic, but I do suspect a certain percentage of our workforce will continue to work from home at least part of the time. We don't know the exact percentages, but the percentages of remote workers, even as vaccinations get rolled out, even post-pandemic, will be materially higher than what we saw pre-pandemic. And this flexibility, we anticipate will be well received by staff. We see this quite a bit today at Citi. For folks that have had to go into the office, even during these partial lockdowns that we saw in Singapore and other parts of Asia, numerous safe management measures have been implemented at Citi, oftentimes actually going above and beyond what the local governments were advocating for. One example, a 2-meter distancing between seats has been implemented globally at Citi in all of our offices, as opposed to what we typically see advocated by the local governments being 1 meter. We've been rotating teams, into the office since last year, Team A, Team B style format, and kudos to all of our colleagues in operations and technology who have really just gone above and beyond, done an unbelievable job over the past year. So remote work is an obvious one, and digitization's a second. We've seen this at Citi through the usage of online banking, through the usage of our digital application. Apparent in other industries, I would well imagine telemedicine, entertainment, streaming services, to name a few. I've certainly done my fair share of Netflix binging, over the past year, far more than I had previously. But these are some of the trends that we're seeing impacting the workplace at Citi. And I imagine we'll get to this a bit later in the discussion, but these trends that we've been seeing, have resulted in the shift of jobs within certain industries, certainly ours. Some workers needing to reskill and upskill, and that's something that we've been actively involved with at Citi in partnership with some of the local industry groups. Thanks, Adam.
Yeah, Joe, just on that, just before I bring in Renee, actually, just on the on that side of things, with Citi, that's a really thorough overview, thank you. Just on productivity, is that something that you've seen? We've touched on that this week, actually, with regard to productivity. When you say what you've brought in, have you noticed an upside in productivity? Some persons have mentioned there's been a huge upside. Some people have mentioned the downside. How have you found things with regard to that sort of redesign and remote working, just out of interest?
So we haven't seen a drop in productivity by and large. And kudos to our ops and tech folks, our colleagues who, again, overnight, basically brought our offices home. In many respects. So we haven't seen a drop in productivity. I'd be remiss to say that we've seen an uptick in productivity. It's hard to replace colleagues, congregating in the office and communicating very, very easily. But we haven't seen a drop. Those are my thoughts on that.
Which is good. I mean, certainly know from your point of view. Renee, I'm going to bring you in now because, Renee, when we've engaged, you've obviously recently filed or produced reports in conjunction with the World Economic Forum, as you mentioned to me previously, and that was resetting the future of the work agenda. So it's very topical for this discussion now. And I suppose when you look at the reformed and redesigned workplaces we're talking about, I think one of those reports are companies are transforming organizations and work design. So from your perspective, and also from your reports that you're finding, I'm going to bring you in. What have you found, if you like, with those reports? And if you can elaborate on that, that'd be fantastic.
Sure. Yeah, no problem. So I guess to set the scene from a holistic perspective, Mercer collaborated with the World Economic Forum to produce the report Resetting the Future of Work Agenda. We've also just released our Global Talent Trends report for 2021. And when we look at all of the findings out of there, with literally thousands and thousands of companies inputting globally, we sort of distilled it down into 4 key trends around the way that work is transforming. And so I'll just outline those so to give context. The first trend is that companies are transforming their organisation and their work to be more agile. Now, Josh has just spoken about that with regards to flexible working and digitisation. But the other pieces that are coming in there are the sharing of work internally. So, 82% of companies said that they're sharing their talent internally far more than they ever had before. The second trend that's there is that companies are obviously making a rapid shift from a technology perspective, but importantly, they're actually prioritising reskilling employees. So recognising that employees are going to need to be reskilled to be able to cope with the dramatic shift that's happening from a technology perspective. An example of that, I guess, with some Asia companies, 63% of HR leaders in Southeast Asia report that skill development will be a primary focus in 2021, and that they're specifically focusing on key talent pools and the skills that they need. The third area and key trend that we saw globally is that employee wellbeing has come right to the top of the list for all employers. Now, obviously, health and safety drives some of that, but importantly, employers are looking at really holistic approaches to the way that they can engage with their employees and ensure their wellbeing. So we're seeing a lot of companies, and in particular, actually, a lot of companies in Southeast Asia reported that they are engaging with their employees to co-create what the workforce will be and the way they work going forward. And we also found that companies in Asia are far more likely than companies globally to be deploying remote health and benefits as a tool as well. Fourth key trend that we're calling out is that employers are moving to people-centric leadership models. So again, really starting to co-create the way that the workforce needs to operate with individual employees, right through to reassessing the way that offices are used and the way that we develop this hybrid working model. So they were the macro trends that were in there, and there's obviously a lot of data that underneath, but I think that they were 4 key trends that is top of mind, particularly for 2021.
Fascinating, and we will blend those into the sessions that we come on to, so thanks for that. And I'm sure they're fascinated reading those reports. Lisa, I'm going to bring you in because I think that when we talk about the sort of, again, this topic around the workplace, I think when we've mentioned things before or discussed things, we talk about leadership, and I think that's one of the areas that you'd mentioned that has sort of, I suppose, not redesigned the workplace, but it plays its key part in that now and I suppose the future. I'm coming to you. Your thoughts would be fantastic.
Yeah, thank you, Adam. And I just get goosebumps, right, when I hear Renee and Joelle talk, because I think what this pandemic has really shown us, that the world is really small. It's smaller than we think. We are experiencing the pandemic everywhere. The experiences, the stresses, the challenges is actually happening everywhere, and we all feel the same issues and challenges, and it also is showing up fault lines that have been there but may not actually be so exposed, be it on a macro geopolitical sense or even, homes of individuals. So as Renee talked about all the skills, and consideration of flexible work, we realize these things we can implement, we can train, we can learn. The thing about this is really how some companies do better than others, and it does come down to leadership and foundation of trust that leadership has built over the years with employees. And I think this time, in these very unprecedented times, leaders are really called with the increasing speed to navigate polarity on spectrums, and they have to listen to all voices. They have to be able to be consistent and flexible. Consistent in terms of policies, procedures, ensuring access and parity to employees. But still, I think, Adam, as you say, how do you still be very personal in that conversation and having that flexibility? It's also about hard work. I think Joelle talked about productivity. We saw the same thing. We didn't see a dip in productivity, and some might argue actually increase. The challenge of the leader is not really only about productivity, efficiency, innovation, but it also is how do you make time in these kind of spaces for people? How do you make time to care? How do you make time to listen? How do you make time to coach beyond the task and driving the productivity up? And lastly, I would say in the leadership, it's about how do you collaborate and compete? Because you need to collaborate. I think it was Renee, right? You mentioned about internal staff, collaborating everything. But yet, you still as a team, as companies, you need to compete. So how do you collaborate and compete at the same time, fostering alliances through apparent differences, alliances and similarities across culture and age groups to really find opportunities so that we can make the world a better place. So leadership challenges, I think, are getting more exciting, if I might put it that way. It requires a lot of mindset shifts, multi-textural ability, and a lot of courage. So I think it will really be an exciting time in the years ahead.
Yeah, I thanks for that, Lisa. I think that the productivity, we have a session on mental health and well-being as we go through this session. I think there's a link to that around how much we're driving productivity, the ups and the downs to it, at what cost. But we'll come on to that. Sanjeev, I'm going to bring you in. Diagnostics is obviously playing a key part during these times, and I think that from a, I suppose, redesigned workplace, from your perspective, when it comes to probably the safety aspect and that side of things, maybe I can come to you around your thoughts on that redesigned workplace and how that may look in the future from your perspective, or go from there.
Yeah, thanks, Adam, and hi everyone. So yes, I think like other panelists mentioned, the pandemic has disrupted lives and livelihoods across the globe and geographies, and this part of the world is no exception. And the initial phase of the pandemic was of the governments, and very rightly so, was to save lives, which is now moving to saving livelihoods. And now it is both saving lives and livelihoods. And that is where, everyone talked about the remote working, which is this pandemic has normalized the remote working. But at some point in time, there would be a need for employees to go back to offices and also continue with their mission critical activities. And that is where we believe, the organizations will have to get the trust of the employees and impart that confidence that workplaces are safe to operate. And this is where diagnostics can play a very important role in ensuring that you identify the stream of employees who are potentially infected or could infect others, and this will bring in a lot more confidence, and that is where we at Avid are also helping the organizations in continuing with their mission critical activities in bringing in safety in office places.
Yeah, we're on rotation here actually, so we're sort of 50% in, or A in the B team as we call it. So I think it's been a real mindset shift in making sure that the office is safe as we move forward, and that's given people that sort of, I suppose, calm feeling of making sure that where they are going, rather than being at home where they may feel safe, they're coming to the workplace. And I think what Avid are doing certainly is certainly helping around the world, which is fantastic. So thanks for that. I suppose, we've only got an hour. We could keep going for a long time, but I'm going to get through some of these sections, if you like, in terms of this broad topic. And one of them is the talent demand and supply. Now, firsthand, I can see the demand talent coming through from the market space. In certainly, say, technology. We've touched on that this week. We talk about digital transformation pretty much every day, and the demand for talent coming through. And we know during tough times, the talent war will come to the I suppose, to a large will dial up. I suppose from my perspective, that's fine, but also what will play a key part is retention of staff. And I think that's where I'd like to touch on here with regard to talent, demand and supply, if you like, as a subsector. We talk about talent onboarding and that side of things, but what are we doing to retain our staff? And Lisa, I'm going to come to you for that first, because I think that, you know, with liaison, we talk about values and that type of things. But for me, many businesses, and I'm talking to many businesses, many industries, about talent, you know, talent pooling, talent supplies, what's the future look like? We've done lots of different reports, not probably on the same level as you, Renee, but in terms of retention, I think that absolutely must be paramount at these times as well to create the base of moving forwards. And obviously, new areas of talent will be required. But Lisa, your thoughts on this sort of retention, if you like? I'm going to come to you for that.
Right. Oh, thank you so much. Well, you know, interesting topic that plagues us in every part of our career, to be very honest. It's interesting you asked me that, because in a recent town hall, it was asked, and we had several leaders who also answered this question. Obviously, we also led with conversations of opportunities, reskilling, so on and so forth. I think the typical in which many companies, my esteemed colleagues here, I'm sure we do. What was really interesting was this story shared by one of our leaders. And she said, I have been 21 years here. And it's something I never thought I would be here for 21 years. And she reflected, what is it that caused her to stay for 21 years? And that's when she talked about how her values, her purpose aligned with the company's values and purpose. And that's also what I always say, when those two purposes match, it really is magic, because it drives us to improve ourselves, it drives us to collaborate with the broader ecosystem to really make a bigger impact, both internally as well as externally in the world itself. Of course, companies like ourselves, we have to provide the platform access to resource, right? Or to be able to find purpose. And many people I speak to sometimes may not have actually discovered it or really have it internalized. So in J&J itself, we put all this together in what we call our Human Performance Institute, where we drive three main areas. One is about purpose, having tools and content resources to help people discover and leverage that to grow. The other is leadership, in which we talked about just now, where we really believe is very important because leaders set the tone and the culture for the company, as well as the behaviors that are expected. The last is about energy. It's our science-based approach in how do you manage energy, resilience, and well-being. So when we are able to put all this together, you find that employees are definitely much more engaged as a whole with the company, and they'll find ways, to grow and reskill. And we also provide other platforms. For example, Talent for Good, where we allow or we give opportunities for talents to volunteer or have sabbaticals with social enterprises. We also have employee resource groups. So the more you can allow the employee to live out who they are in the company, in the workplace, and for the world, it makes a big difference.
Yeah. I think beautifully linked there to the culture. We see that a lot with regard to, candidates asking about the culture of a business and the DNA of a business. I think it's really important for making a decision. Joel, I'm going to bring you in because on that side of things, with regard to, cities, and I know that I think it was the CEO mentioned that he wanted 40% more women in senior roles, which is fantastic. I suppose, how is that going? I think it's on point or on track. That's really it's exciting. It's interesting. How is that going? And I suppose that would again link back to talent when you bring talent in, because I think also I read that we see an uplift in the economy because of the women coming on board or more hiring of women. So can you elaborate on that? Because that's quite fascinating. Super exciting.
Absolutely. Thanks, Adam. So you're right. Globally, regionally, and locally here, where I am in Singapore, we have been laser focused on gender diversity. As a company, we've been looking to improve our overall female representation at that mid to senior level within our company. And hopefully, as a result of that, we're also keen to improve our overall pay equity. And you are correct. Our previous CEO, who just stepped down, has committed to getting to 40% representation globally within this mid to senior level. And similarly, we have targets regionally and across all countries. So we're all very, very focused on this. Should note that we just celebrated International Women's Day this year with particular pride, as Jane Fraser, our newly appointed global CEO, made history as the first woman to lead one of Wall Street's biggest banks. So a critical and long-awaited moment for all of us. But more specifically, if there's a silver lining perhaps to this pandemic, it's been the adoption of more flexible work arrangements, more remote working. And as we redesign our working model and overall process, a worker's location, working hours won't necessarily matter as much perhaps as they previously did. And this we anticipate this will vastly expand access to talent pools, such as women who have perhaps taken time off and are looking to return to work. And we've already seen some good concrete examples of this locally in Singapore. We partnered recently with a local NPO called Mums at Work. And this is a program that aims to provide an avenue for women to reestablish themselves in the corporate world. They've taken time off, they want to come back. And we've seen some initial success over the last year or so partnering with this group, with this NPO. Staff hired under this program provided extensive support, personal coaches, mentors. So early days, but so far so good. And in terms of those percentages that you asked about, that I alluded to, we are on track to hit those targets. Thanks.
Fantastic. Adam. No, it's a pleasure. And I have to say hi to our inspiring global CEO, Linda Perner, who's based out of the States as well, who's just been voted in the top 100 of staffing influencers. So a very good week in terms of International Women's Week. So great to hear that Citi have made superb advancements and on point. I suppose as we move forwards into the sort of reskilling and upskilling the workforce, no doubt COVID has changed the sort of business ecosystem, if you like, and along with everyone having to adjust to the new norm, therefore upskilling and reskilling workforce is absolutely paramount. We heard the CEO of DBS earlier in the week talk about some jobs will be made, millions of jobs will be made redundant, if you like, or won't be there anymore. But then there'll be more, an uplift in other jobs elsewhere. So this is hugely topical, hugely important right now, this reskilling, upskilling. We see that in Singapore, we see it globally. Digitalization's playing its part. In a way, it's exciting, I suppose. It's daunting for some. I suppose, René, I'm going to bring you in, because obviously these reports that you've done in conjunction with the Economic Forum is fascinating. And we're leveraging for, I think we've said before, the leverage for technology and for business transformation. But your thoughts on the sort of, I suppose, reskilling and upskilling the workforce to, where we were post or pre-post and where the future is going. What have you found in terms of the report? And I suppose from your perspective would be really interesting for our audience.
Look, this was a trend that was there pre-COVID, obviously, but COVID, like it's done for many things, has just accelerated at no end. So the trend towards digitization, the trend towards recognising skills and evaluating jobs differently was all there. It's now just on steroids, if you like. So what we've seen, and from a report perspective and data, is that obviously, the vast majority of companies have embraced digitization over the past 12 months and have made leaps in that space that wouldn't have been possible in a normal type of environment. And Joel alluded to that, and Mercer, we were exactly the same. We literally went from office to remote-based working across 50 countries overnight. The second bit there is there has already been quite a dramatic shift to the sharing of talent, and I alluded that before. And the sharing of talent in an organisation is not just about retaining that talent, but it's actually about using those skills in different ways as well. So organisations are already looking into their own skill set amongst their people and saying, right, who has these types of talents and how can I deploy them into a different environment for a specific need there? So that's part of that as well. The next bit, as I alluded to, is that companies are very deliberately starting that reskilling. So really starting to identify what are the skills that they have today, what are the skills that they need over the future, and then bridging the path to getting there. And recognising that there will be a lot of new jobs opened up and everything, but we won't be able to hire in everybody new with every new skill set that we need. Organisations will simply have to reskill the resources that they have, which is great news. So organisations are being very deliberate, and the majority of organisations in Asia are being deliberate about that reskilling. I think where it'll get really interesting as we look out is how do organisations, get holistic approaches to defining the skill sets that they value, and then do they actually start to put, monetary value even on the attainment of those skills. At the moment, there aren't many organisations around the world who are rewarding the attainment of skills. We found about 11% of organisations around the world are directly rewarding, but that's all. But I think that is a trend that will change. Employers will have to incentivise their employees to obtain new skills, and will also start to reward employees, perhaps rather than just on jobs, on the types of skills that they're bringing to a particular role as well.
And the type of skills moving forward, I suppose, this digitalisation, and we talk about every day, is that something, when we look at the technology sector, that side of things where there's a, real talent shortage here in the market and probably globally, to be fair, when you look at the upskilling and the changing, I suppose if you had a crystal ball and you move forward, say, 12 months, 24 months, and reskilling, some of those jobs were made redundant. What do you think is going to come? What's coming in terms of those roles? Where's the sort of, I suppose, percentages moving to, may I ask, or in your opinion?
Yeah, sure. In my view, there's broad categories again. I mean, technology is a broad category, but actually, technology savviness is going to be very important, and being able to adapt to new technologies. It's really interesting that one of the most in-demand courses around the world is Python, and that's across a broad base of people around the world. So specific skills and getting it. It's not about being a Python expert, it's about understanding the language a little bit and actually being more familiar with those things. So I think that will be a critical one that we'll see. I think on a separate note to technology, organisations are also going to be looking for people who are able to be, agile and flexible and manage change. So, the old change curve of having this time to get people on board and make it all smooth and successful just isn't there anymore. So people that are able to, jump into new circumstances, make those new circumstances successful, make others successful around them, that in itself is going to be a skill set that's very valued. Yeah,
I've got my team here requesting actually to do an agile course as well, so the technical recruiters. So everyone's looking to upskill. It's a fascinating space. Joel, from your side, I'm just going to bring you in here from a Citibank perspective, in terms of, I suppose, the reskilling, or I suppose being upskilled. Let's start with the reskilling, if you like. How's that going, or how are you possibly implementing that, or looking again, crystal ball, looking forward in the next 12 months with regard to that side?
Sure. Thanks, Adam. Very engaged with regard to reskilling our existing staff, and then ideally redeploying them to other parts of the bank. We've been doing a lot of this locally in Singapore in partnership with the IBF. To reskill quite a number of our employees, particularly in our consumer banking. Again, as we move more digital, and as there's more of a focus on certain roles versus other roles, we've been doing a lot of reskilling, putting our folks through specific targeted programs to create more of a future ready workforce. So that's something that's been a big focus of ours. In terms of future skills, specific skills that I think are needed, and I don't want to be repetitive to what Renee alluded to. There's so many to highlight. Let me perhaps note a few that come to my mind that we're looking at. Certainly anything around data literacy, tech savviness. The need to be comfortable around data and technology is mission critical for any role nowadays at Citi. The ability to deal with ambiguity, employees are really going to need to have the ability to deal with ambiguity, to deal with operating sort of within shades of gray, even embrace it. Change is happening at a rapid pace, and this leads oftentimes to uncertainty. I will note that at Citi we do joke that the C in Citi stands for change, because it's the only true constant at Citi. So I imagine Citi bankers should be well positioned there. Another would be the ability to build rapport and relationships. Not that this wasn't important previously, but as we shift to more of a virtual world, being able to do this, build rapport with others, with colleagues, with clients, build relationships from a distance, will differentiate those who will succeed and perhaps those who won't be as successful. So those are a few that I think are important to me and to our firm. Thanks, Adam.
Okay. No, and just one question on it, Joe. When you talk about the sort of, I suppose, reskilling, are the staff sort of very open to that? Is there resilience? Is it sort of being received as a positive? I suppose, look, in terms of, I would love to be reskilled at my stage of career at a certain stage, but I'm assuming that is a positive within, and we'll come to you in a second, Lisa. But is that happening in terms of positive, people very open? Because, we all know that change is not necessarily human nature. It's is it natural? But I suppose at Citibank, is that happening? Is it positive? Are people really open to not just technology, other skill sets? Are you finding?
Short answer is yes. Our staff have been very receptive to continuing education, to being reskilled. We've been very transparent with them along the way, which by and large they appreciate. Who wouldn't want to learn new skills and be able to take on different roles? So largely it's been very little resistance, and it's been quite well received.
Brilliant. Lisa, I'm going to bring you in because I know that we talk, sort of skill sets of the future is sort of maybe multidisciplinary, but your take from a J&J perspective, I know you've got thoughts on this, so please do share.
Yeah, it was so interesting as I was listening to everyone talk about reskilling, and I was just sitting here thinking maybe we should coin a different term. Maybe it's end skilling, because at least in the J&J context, it's not about changing from one to another. We still need all the expertise that they have, because from a healthcare perspective, for us, it's about access, creating access for our patients. It's about working with governments, working with regulatory. It's about, research and development. It's about the science, and it's about professional education to our doctors, nurses. So we still need all that, except the route to that is actually a little bit different. And the way we need to think about that is a little bit different. So from the perspective of end skilling, it is that maybe with digital, that with data science, and obviously, underlined with what I think, Joel, you talked about, the ability to navigate across multi-parties in the ecosystem, be it internally or externally. For us in healthcare, definitely the ecosystem is a very big conversation for us. So the end skilling, in this whole conversation is how do you build that multidisciplinary conversation? And Renee, maybe I need to go and take a Python course too after this. But that's the curiosity we want people to have, right? To say, hey, for me to be more effective, I need to go take a Python course. I need to help them understand the language of digital. How does that change the mode of the business itself? So doing that, I think, requires us as a company to create the same experience internally. We can't be expecting, our sales or everyone to be, very digital, but internally we're still making them doing pen and paper sign up and stuff. So challenge for us is how do we make sure that our experience internally is personalized, frictionless, at scale, and really easy to work with in a very digital conversation. So multidisciplinary to me is very, very important. The second portion, I think, it's not so much skills, but really enablement of resilience and agility. I think we have seen this last year, and we will continue, I think, to experience this year and year ahead. I think change is not going to slow down. I think, as both my colleagues talked about, I think it will continue be on steroids and plus. So the question is, are our employees actually able to be resilient, to be able to manage this across the large spectrum of their work and broader life, and also be agile enough to, dance in many different moments itself. And I think that's what we need to do. And lastly, I know I sound a broken record, but leadership really makes a difference.
I was
How
going
do
to
you
ask you. Actually. I was going to. I'm not going about. I was going to ask about leadership. I think we're all sitting here leading teams and everything, and I think that one of the things, are the leaders being upskilled? I'm assuming they are, because we're in a different mode of leadership, whether it's in person, whether it's physically, whether it's behind the camera at Zoom. You can't read people so much on Zoom and so on. But I'm assuming I know you're passionate about leadership, but in terms of leadership upskilling, how are you sort of combating that, if you like?
Yeah, I think the thing is really experience makes a lot of difference. Put them in the conversation. So, we are experimenting on how does hybrid work, right? And of course, all of us have our different opinions on that. And I just mentioned to one of our leaders different days, I said, think of this as building new muscles for yourself. Experiencing, let's do that. Put the technology in a new thing beyond Zoom. What can we do? That's one. Two is about education. So we do bring in our data scientists, our CIOs, with our top, I would say, leaders itself, to show them what is possible and what is being done. And once they see possibilities, it comes. So we can't be, reskilling, end-skilling, or whatever you want to say, our mass of people, but it chokes on the top if that mindset does not shift itself. And I would say COVID has really put the fire under everyone's seat, to say, I got to get to it. So like for me, I got to perhaps get to Python, right after this as well. Beyond having, a broader concept, but really getting hands-on, building websites, which I just tried recently and I felt a sense of great achievement. So I'm sure leaders at every level, if you put them to that and they can do that, it's a great sense of achievement, and it opens up possibilities for everyone as well. And they need to know nowadays leadership, end to end, A to Z, ecosystem, internally, externally, minor, major, they have to get to that.
Yeah, good point. And Sanjeev, on the technology side, I know Abbott obviously invests hugely in sort of life-changing technologies, and I suppose from your side, upskilling and reskilling, you deliver, I suppose, the whole side of things, and what I know that we've chatted about around the technology. You've seen a shift there yourself in terms of diagnostics playing a key part in terms of reskilling people as well. I mean, to be able to deliver what you are delivering.
Yeah, thanks, Adam. I think there are two portions to your questions. First of all, on the portfolio development and bringing it to the market, I think that has. Just to give you an example, in last about 7 months, we have launched about 7 new products. Okay, which in healthcare organizations, normally it takes about 3 to 4 years to launch a product, but in 7 years, launching as many products, that shows the speed and the tenacity of the R&D organization. But also taking these products into the market and launching them. I think we all talked about the office-based employees and their safety and their mental and health and wellness, but there are a whole population of field employees. Those who are in contact with, let's say, healthcare professionals. Now, suddenly they were in a situation that they could not contact the healthcare professionals because of the lockdowns or the movement restrictions, etc. But a tremendous flexibility, adaptability, and resilience the teams have shown. I think that has been amazing. Many of them have, reskilled themselves and found another way of meeting their target audience. But I think we also helped by way of training to reskill very quickly, and as a result of which, hugely successful. So yes, absolutely. On the technology side, on the R&D side, and also enhancing our manufacturing capacities, and then taking the product to the market. I think across the chain we have seen employees responding and showing flexibility. I think that has really put us in a good position.
Yeah, fantastic job. We know how speed to market, what you're doing in diagnostics has been tremendous. Now, the last sort of, I suppose, sector we're moving on to is the mental health and well-being, and this is something I think passionate, and I think that when you look at the COVID world, that still is. I think this is one of the things that's come out in a, in some ways in a positive light around sort of support and that mental health, that well-being covers a broad range. We've heard all this week about spiritual, in terms of mental health, physical health, and this is something we'll get through probably in about 10 or 15 minutes as best we can with the panel. But I know I'm very passionate about it in terms of the way, to get the best out of your staff. What are they going through when you shut down Zoom? All the different things, whether it's family. I sat through AmCham with a head of legal for another bank, and he was passionate about setting up a helpline, which he's doing, which was very, very busy, trying to support staff around overseas when you've got your sort of, I suppose, family and we can't travel as freely. There are many different forms that are going on, and we must support our staff. I suppose, look, Joel, I'm going to come to you first from a Citibank. We're all going to interact on this session because I know we're all very passionate about it, actually. But Joel, supporting your staff at Citi, what have you done? I mean, look, that's a very broad question, but I suppose if you pinpoint it down, what have you done, or what are you doing? What are you finding even that needs to?
Absolutely. Thanks, Adam. It's an important one. Yeah. So at Citi, and I imagine not dissimilar from my fellow panelists, today at their firms, we've really consistently aimed to put the safety and overall welfare of our entire employee population first and foremost, since day one of this pandemic, and this will unquestionably continue moving forward. So, in terms of support for staff, staff who needed to continue to work on site, and we did have a handful of folks, who just given the nature of their roles, needed to, in Singapore through the circuit breaker, through the partial lockdown period, had to be going to the office. We're provided with, numerous safe management measures in the office to ensure a safe environment, masks, transportation, meal claims, things of that nature. Staff working from home, which was the majority of our folks, there were reimbursements for certain expenses that they were incurring, incremental Wi-Fi, special office equipment. Again, our ops and tech folks really overnight brought our offices to our homes, in a very seamless manner, did a fantastic job. We rolled out a COVID-19 support package for staff, which included medical teleconsultation services, to your point around mental health and employee assistance program, counseling services, free COVID-19 related special insurance coverage, was also provided through our insurance provider. We're now in the process of providing staff with some benefits related to vaccinations as the vaccine implementation phases get underway. So quite a bit. And I'd be remiss if I didn't mention, separate from our staff, and this is not unique to Singapore, but I'll talk to Singapore. We also really did look to do our part for the broader population and community as well. We took a decision as a company to return the job support scheme, the JSS money, to the Singapore government. This was a program aimed to help employers with wage support, during that critical period last year, earlier days of COVID. And so Citi Singapore, in consultation with our regional and global management teams, took a decision to return the funding so that it could be used for those, with the greatest need, within the Singapore community. And a decision that, I was personally very proud of. I had just come into my role, and I know that employees in Singapore, across the board were really proud of as well. So wanted to flag that as well. A lot of support for employees, but also trying to do our part for our local communities.
Well,
Thanks,
right.
man.
So, no, it's a pleasure. I mean, I'm when it comes to mental health and different things, you're hearing about bicycles in offices, yoga centers coming in from a more physical perspective. I heard a company actually with bikes in the office, actually stand-up desks, all these different things to, I suppose, support and all the different things that people are going through, speaking to people and so on. Renee, I'm going to bring you in actually, because I know that you mentioned about a holistic manner in terms of that well-being space and in that thought process, the reports you've done. Over to you on the mental health and well-being in terms of what you're finding, or the reports have, I suppose, come to the front with, if you like.
Sure. So I will say that there are some very interesting stories there, and you alluded to some of them, but I assure you that not every employer is putting bikes and yoga mats in their offices to get people back. So what we are seeing, a lot of people are doing it at home, for sure.
Yeah.
What we are seeing is that employers are trying to look at well-being as not just physical well-being. So, at the start of COVID, it was very much about the immediate response, making sure that employees were safe, that they had good access to medicine, that they were covered and cared for, etc. If they had to come to the office, that they were well protected on their commutes there. So, that was the start of it. But again, COVID has accelerated these trends that we were seeing beforehand. And one of the trends that we had been seeing is more of a focus on mental well-being, more of a focus on preventative healthcare and so on as well. So that has all accelerated. And the work that Mercer's doing with employers now is really focused on what are the elements of physical well-being, mental well-being, and preventative healthcare that need to be in place and that employers can help sponsor with employees. So, that at the most basic form was employee assistance programs, but now we have employers who are looking to make sure that the benefits that they provide some provisions for mental wellbeing or for counselling, but also that there is access to the whole variety of tools that might help individuals. Employers have invested in apps, in meditation programs, in yoga programs, as you said, and making a lot of that available virtually and remote for employees so they can engage in their own time as well. And then lastly, I'll say that I think most employers are being very, very considerate to make sure that this is about families and broader households as well. So really trying to deliver these types of benefits, not just to the individuals that they directly employ, but for the families that surround them, so that everybody can be healthy in more of a proactive way.
Yeah, fascinating. I mean, the report you've done must really, as you say, come with some really interesting, I suppose, reports, ideas, findings, and everything. And that's what I'm hearing as well. It's a fascinating play to support your staff to help them get the best of them. And Sanjeev, I'm going to come to you because I know when we've chatted before, this is a real passion as well in terms of that, or strong views around the mental health side of things and well-being, and what we discussed last week. So, Sanjeev, from your side, I'm assuming from the diagnostic side, supporting your staff. You mentioned it previously. What sort of things have you found or doing?
Yeah, in fact, there are two aspects here. First of all, I think as Renee also mentioned, that during the crisis, the people may have struggled with personal grief at the loss of some loved one, or isolation and loneliness, or general anxiety about the future. Or overload caused by the working long hours, because remote working is not easy working. So that is one aspect which weighs on the minds of the employees. The second one is this whole idea about whether my workplace is going to be safe if I am asked to return to work. Yeah. So can I interact with other employees in a safe manner without any worries? And that is where, from as a leading diagnostic organization, as a leading diagnostic company, we have put together certain solutions where now we are supporting and helping organizations, particularly in aviation, maritime, education, or even industrial sectors, where this trust is extremely important for employees to get back to work. And I think that is one aspect which is weighing in the minds of employees that we see across the industries. And that is where, with almost over 500, 600 leading multinationals and other organizations that we are working with, this is a common theme that we get. That first question that employees ask is whether I will be safe when you ask me to get back to work. And I think there are several solutions, and we have been the pioneers in this, in putting together certain solutions and helping the organizations.
Yeah, I think that mental health and coming back to work is hugely important. You see it every day, certainly here on a rotation system, and getting people back to work. It's a great job there. In terms of Lisa bringing you in, and I know that humanising the workspace, you've mentioned to me before, and you can talk about what J&J is doing. I'm sure. So enlightening us. It will be fascinating to hear.
Yeah, thank you very much. And maybe I'll just pick up from what my colleagues talked about, safety, right? There's a lot of mental well-being, emotional well-being really comes from this whole idea of, are you safe? Do you feel safe physically, psychologically, or emotionally? And in J&J, we are very fortunate that we started on this path really long ago, where we feel the integration of physical, mental, emotional, and spiritual, meaning purpose, health, is very important. And if we can help each employee to be aware of their whole person, and each aspect of it to be able to work on that, the resilience, well-being will come. And therefore, we have lots of policies, programs, that are in place not only for employees, but also for their families. So you talk about gym equipment. We have gym equipment in the office, and we also give reimbursement to our staff to buy and purchase equipment at home during this time, because you're not able to go to the gym. So what can we do to help in the physical wellness? Right, work environment is to talk about the safety, making sure that we have all the things in place so employees come back and they feel safe, but also allowing them to work from home where it's necessary, and enabling their work environment the home environment to be a safe place to work, because not everyone actually has the luxury to be able to do that. So I'm so glad when I hear Joel talk about it, because as more companies do a lot of these, we are really benefiting the community at large, right? Not only within our company itself. In psychological safety, in COVID and now, I think a lot of things that come in people's minds: do I have a job? Do I have money, to be able to support my family? If I have someone who is not well, can I take leave? How am I going to do all the caregiving in the middle of everything? So J&J actually put in place many, I would say, interventions very quickly on, I would say, a very strong foundation that we have already. So we declared very early on no COVID-related reduction in force. We gave paid time off or flexible schedule for people to care for family, and that really took away a lot of, I would say, stress that our, I would say mainly our essential staff, like what Joe talked about, our supply chain, our essential staff, who felt they had to come to work all the time. We gave, people paid time off with underlying health conditions that you can't come back. So many things around, I think, giving that psychological safety itself for people to feel that, hey, it's important. Also, I think from an organizational viewpoint, we also simplified many of our processes that we will usually put in place, so that people can focus into what really matters most as they battle with multiple things that are happening at home and work as well. But what is also good is, our leaders, we encourage, hey, is the psychological fun of getting together, is it Zoom or is it, different ways? And you saw so many, I think, creative ideas that people had: Zoom parties, weekly huddles. And in an interesting way, it actually built relationships closer together. So, in terms of this, then what's next, right? Because I think as a company, we've really done quite a bit based from our history, not only a reaction to COVID itself. It's how can we further build this resilience? How can we further build agility? How can we further give people that emotional well-being that then translates into the mental well-being as well. And employee resource groups are very, very important. Destigmatization is very, very important. And that's how we are also trying to build the whole thing into our DNA beyond the programs and policies that are there. So thank you.
It's fascinating to have four senior inspiring figures all sort of, I suppose, on the same page when it comes to this sort of hugely important topic. We've had questions come in. I've picked one, and I'm going to come to you, Joel. The question is, from one of our audiences, as work from home becomes more prevalent, how are your companies thinking about where you relocate particular roles in HQ versus hub versus remote? So, Joel, I'm going to come to you first with that, and then I'm going to come to Renee to see her view as well. But, Joel, you'll start on that question. So, as work from home becomes more prevalent, how are your companies thinking about where you locate/relocate particular roles in HQ versus hub versus remote?
Great question. And it's a top of mind issue. It's something that we talk about quite a bit. COVID has allowed us the opportunity to take a step back and really rethink where work can be done and where it should be done. We don't feel that we're wedded to any one location anymore. Just because historically a role was done in Singapore, for example, in the office, well, perhaps moving forward, if that role allows, it can be done remotely, or it can be done within Singapore, it can be done remotely outside of Singapore. So it's opened up a number of possibilities, which in turn has actually opened up access to different talent pools. Earlier on, I talked about women who perhaps have left the workforce but are keen to come back now, and to be able to bring them back into the workforce, but give them more flexibility in terms of where they perform their jobs, has still early days, but has opened up a lot of really interesting possibilities. So we're looking at each role and determining, can this role be done remotely? Can it be done? Does it have to be done in the office? Can it be done offshore? So that's an ongoing review that we're fully engaged in at the moment.
Fine. Renee, just quickly, I'm going to get timed out shortly, but just your thoughts from your report on that same question, because you would have a broad range as well. Thank you, Joe, for that great opinion from a city perspective. But Renee, anything from your side around what that, the sort of, I suppose, how companies are thinking around that?
Yeah, so what Joel described for City is what a lot of organisations are doing. The only thing that I'll say that's additive is that it's probably less about relocating and more about defining how offices and home will work. So certainly most employers around the world are really looking at designing their office space for the future in what they want it to be used for, how they want people to come to the office to collaborate, to work, etc. So I think that's the big trend, is really thinking differently about those offices, that we're not going to come into the office to sit in a small room or in a cubicle to do emails. We're going to come in for a different purpose, and how do we have the space that creates that?
Yeah. And last, I'm going to go one more question. I'm going to push the boundaries. One last question. Lisa, I'm going to come to you. Another question has come in from our global audience. What are your thoughts on working from home from a permanent basis? What are the pros and cons of a fully remote, hybrid, and fully in-office models?
Yeah, I love that question, because that is such a highly debatable and everyone has their opinion. And I just want to pivot off actually Renee's comment, because it's not about, is it all remote or what? The question is really, what is the intent? What are we trying to achieve, right? And if we want to achieve innovation, collaboration, what is the best way to do that? So, and I think many companies actually have very different places where you go. And so the question is, what is the home remote for? And what is the office for? And I think that's one big question. Second big question I think the companies are thinking about is really the legal and tax implication. So sometimes it's not just so easy, right, for us to say, hey, let's put the job somewhere else. There are implications in which there is compliance and government regulations that we need to abide by. So the question is, where are our boundaries and where can we push, and then where can we add on as well? So I would say that many companies we've spoken to, including J&J, we find that many employees are also telling us. So we put out a pulse survey that we are seeing the sentiment. Employees are telling us that there is a space to come back together for the social, the culture, the innovation, the collaboration. So the question now is actually, what is the proportion rather than fully one or fully the other, so that it meets both individual needs as well as the organization needs itself.
Good, yeah, great question, actually, very juicy. Look, in terms of wrapping up, I'm going to have to wrap up now. It's been a privilege, actually, to moderate this session with such a fantastic panel. Renee, thank you so much. Lisa, thank you so much. Joel, thank you so much. Sanjeev, thank you so much. I think it's been we could keep going. I'd love to, but we haven't got time. I've got to get back, otherwise I'll get told off. So I'm going to hand back now to Prerna, back in the mainstream, if you like, so we can move on from this session. But again, it's been fascinating. I hope the audience has enjoyed it. I wish everyone all the best for the rest of the summit. You've done a great job, AmCham, so far. Superb. Thank you again, panel. And I'm going to hand back now to Prerna. Thank you.